What if the one thing you've been doing every single morning is the very thing that's quietly destroying your body? Not the food you eat, not how much you sleep, something simpler than that. Something so normal, so everyday, that most people over 60 never even think to question it. Doctors are now seeing a pattern that keeps showing up in patients who come in complaining of fatigue that won't go away, joints that ache for no clear reason, a mind that feels foggy even after a full night of rest. And when they look closer, they find the same routine, done quietly every day by millions of people who had no idea it was hurting them. If you are over 60, or if someone you love is, the next few minutes might be the most important thing you hear all year. Stay with me. You wake up, maybe it's 6 in the morning, maybe a little earlier, because sleep hasn't been quite the same for the past few years, has it? You get up slowly, the knees remind you they're there, the back takes a moment to cooperate. You shuffle to the bathroom, then to the kitchen. You put on the coffee, or maybe the tea. You sit down, and then you do it. That thing, that routine, the one that feels so right, so established, so you, that skipping it would feel strange. Maybe it's the way you take your medications all at once, first thing, on an empty stomach, because that's what you've always done. Maybe it's the long sit, the hours in the chair after breakfast, because the body just doesn't feel like moving the way it used to. Maybe it's the quiet, the long stretches of being alone because the kids are busy, the friends have moved away or passed on, and the days have gotten quieter than you ever expected them to be. None of this feels like a problem. It feels like life, your life, a life you've built and earned and settled into. But here's what most people don't realize. Routine is powerful. What you repeat every day shapes your body, sometimes in ways you can feel, and sometimes in ways you can't, not yet. The body is incredibly patient. It doesn't send alarms right away. It whispers first. Little signals that are easy to explain away, easy to blame on age, on weather, on a bad night of sleep, the fatigue that doesn't lift after rest, the stiffness that takes longer and longer to ease up in the morning, the brain fog, that strange feeling of reaching for a word, a name, a thought, and finding it just slightly out of reach. Most people over 60 hear those signals and think, that's just getting older. That's normal. And doctors, the good ones, are increasingly worried about exactly that response. Because here's the truth. Not everything you feel after 60 is inevitable. Some of it is reversible. Some of it is the direct result of patterns. Daily patterns that have quietly been compounding for months, maybe years. One of the most alarming ones, chronic, low-level dehydration. It sounds too simple, too basic. But study after study, from institutions like the National Institutes of Health and Johns Hopkins, has shown that adults over 60 are uniquely vulnerable to dehydration. Not the kind that sends you to the hospital, the quiet kind, the kind that floats just below the threshold of discomfort and drains your energy, clouds your mind, and stiffens your joints every single day. And the reason most older adults don't catch it? They're not thirsty. The thirst mechanism weakens with age. Your body stops sending the signal clearly. So you go about your morning, coffee, maybe a glass of juice, and feel like you're doing fine. But by mid-morning, your cells are already running on empty. Let's talk about pain for a moment. Not the dramatic kind. You're not the kind that wakes you up at night or stops you mid-step. I'm talking about the kind that's just always there. The dull ache in the knees when you stand, the tightness in the hips after sitting too long, the shoulders that protest when you reach overhead. You've learned to live around it, haven't you? You adjust, you avoid, you modify. You tell yourself it's fine because you can still manage. You're still doing it. You haven't stopped. But what if I told you that a significant portion of that pain isn't wear and tear? What if it's inflammation? And that inflammation is being fed every single day by something hiding in your routine? Researchers at Harvard Medical School published findings that show chronic low-grade inflammation, what scientists call inflammaging, is directly linked to prolonged sitting, poor sleep quality, and specific dietary patterns that are extremely common in adults over 60. The long morning sit, the breakfast that's mostly refined carbohydrates, the skipped walk because the weather's not quite right today. Each one alone seems harmless, but together, day after day, they create a biological environment where inflammation doesn't just flare, it settles in. It makes itself at home in your joints, your arteries, your brain tissue. And the most painful part, it's quiet. You can't feel inflammation building. You only feel the result. And by then it's been building for a long, long time. Now I need to tell you something that most people aren't told clearly enough. After 60, the heart changes. Not because it's failing, but because it's been working for 6 decades and it's running a different kind of program now. It needs more support, different support. And one of the most alarming things cardiologists are seeing in patients over 60 is the effect of prolonged morning inactivity combined with one very specific dietary habit: excess sodium, hidden sodium. Not the salt you add at the table. Most people have already cut that out. I'm talking about the sodium tucked inside the foods that feel safe. The bread, the canned soup, the store-bought sauces, the healthy frozen meals that line the freezer of millions of seniors across the country. A single serving of canned soup, the comforting kind, the kind that feels like medicine when you're tired, can carry over 800 milligrams of sodium. And many adults over 60 are consuming double, sometimes triple, the recommended daily limit without realizing it. What does that do? It raises blood pressure quietly. It forces the heart to work harder with every single beat. It causes fluid retention that makes the ankles swell. The legs feel heavy. The breath feels just slightly shorter than it used to. And again, it happens slowly, gently. So gently that people adapt to it without realizing they've adapted. They think, this is just how I feel now. But it doesn't have to be. There's something nobody talks about honestly enough. The loneliness, not the kind you admit to people, not the kind you bring up at the doctor's office, the quiet kind, the kind that lives in the space between the end of the morning and the start of the afternoon. When the house is still and the day stretches out ahead and there's just not enough in it. Research from the National Academy of Sciences found that chronic loneliness in adults over 60 has the same physiological impact on the body as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Read that again. 15 cigarettes every day. It elevates cortisol, the stress hormone, which accelerates inflammation, degrades immune function, disrupts sleep, and this is the part that breaks my heart, it literally speeds up cognitive decline. The brain, when isolated, starts to change. It becomes more reactive to threat, more anxious, more prone to misreading neutral situations as dangerous. And the cruelest part of this cycle is that the lonelier a person feels, the harder it becomes to reach out. The world starts to feel just slightly more hostile, less safe, less worth the effort of engaging. So people pull back more, and the silence gets louder. I want you to hear this not as a statistic, but as a truth that someone should have said to you plainly a long time ago. Your emotional health is not separate from your physical health. When the heart is lonely, the body suffers. Measurably, biologically. This isn't poetic, it's physiology. And if you have been feeling that quiet, if your days have been a little too empty, if the phone rings less than it used to, that is not something you need to simply endure. That is something that needs to change because your body is depending on it. Now, here's what I need you to know. Everything I've described, the dehydration, the inflammation, the hidden sodium, the loneliness, none of it is a life sentence. Not at 60, not at 70, not at 80. The human body, even after decades, retains a remarkable ability to respond to change. Scientists call it neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself. They call it metabolic flexibility, the body's ability to shift, adapt, recover. And both of these capacities remain available to you far longer than most people are told. The turnaround doesn't require heroics. It doesn't require a gym membership or a complete overhaul of your kitchen or a radical new lifestyle that doesn't feel like yours. It requires something much simpler and much more powerful. Awareness. In small, consistent shifts, start the morning with water, before the coffee, before anything else. Not because water is magic, but because your cells have been fasting for 8 hours and they are waiting. Give them what they need first. Move within the first 30 minutes of waking. Not a workout, just movement. Walk to the end of the driveway and back. Stretch in the kitchen while the coffee grows. Do 5 slow rotations of each shoulder. The joints need synovial fluid, and fluid only moves when you move. Read the labels. The sodium is hiding in plain sight, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. 1 small swap per week, that's all. Over a month, you will feel the difference. And call someone, not because you have something specific to say, but because connection is medicine. The real kind, the kind that lowers cortisol, raises oxytocin, and tells your nervous system, I am not alone, it is safe to heal. You've spent a lifetime taking care of everyone else. The children, the grandchildren, the house, the responsibilities. You've been the one who showed up, who stayed, who kept going, even when it was hard. And somewhere along the way, quietly, without meaning to, you may have moved yourself to the bottom of the list. This is me, gently, asking you to move yourself back up. Not to the top of the list for some grand gesture. Just back into the picture. Back into the daily conversation you have with your own body and your own life. Because you are not at the end of your story. You're at a chapter that most people underestimate. A chapter where the choices you make today will shape how the next 10, 15, 20 years actually feel. Not just whether you survive them, how you live them. The doctors aren't alarmed because they've given up on people over 60. They're alarmed because they know what's possible, and they watch people miss it day after day because nobody told them clearly enough. Now you know, and knowing is the first step. The most important step, the one that makes all the others possible. If this felt like something you needed to hear, share it with someone else who might need it too. A friend, a sibling, someone you love who has been quietly struggling and doesn't know why. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for the people we care about is simply make sure they don't feel alone in it.